What could be in common between a gramophone and a radio? Nothing, you might say. And you would be wrong. They have a common history of development, competition, and decline. You will learn about one very confusing story about how one very famous gramophone company became a manufacturer of radio receivers, and sold its gramophone business to a radio manufacturing company, which then became a manufacturer of radio gramophones, by watching this video. In 1898, the inventor of the gramophone Emil Bерлínер and his friends Viliam Barry Owen and Trevor Wільямс founded the Gramophone Company for recording and manufacturing records and gramophones. In 1899, Owen bought a painting from the artist Frensísa Barrua called His Master's Voice, which depicts the dog Nipper listening to Edison's phonograph, and asked the artist to replace the image of the phonograph with a gramophone. In 1909, this image became the official logo of the company, one of the most famous in the world of the logo of one of the most famous music brands. And although the Gramophone Company was never officially called His Master's Voice Company, the famous dog on the records announced that the public knew them as such. The same logo was also received by the American subsidiary of the Gramophone Company, known as the Victor Talking Machine Company. In 1922, the leader of the radio industry in Great Britain, the Marconi Company, formed the Marconiphone division to manufacture and sell household radios, which in December 1923 was transformed into a subsidiary of the Marconi Company. Like the Gramophone Company, all Marconi companies developed successfully in the 20s. But in 1929, the global financial crisis broke out and both groups of companies were forced to restructure production in order to get rid of unprofitable assets. In December 1929, Giulio Marconi sold his subsidiary Marconiphone to the Gramophone Company, along with the rights to use the Marconiphone trademark with the G. Marconi logo. And Marconi never returned to the UK consumer radio market. It is a paradoxical situation when a subsidiary company that bears the name and label of the founder no longer has any relation to you and your parent company. But the Gramophone Company was also forced to make a sacrifice. In the same year, it sold its American subsidiary Victor Talking Machine Company, and guess who? To the world leader in the production of superheterodynes, the American corporation RCA, after acquiring the leading gramophone company in the United States. RCA Corporation changed its name to RCA Victor and became the market leader in yet another class of consumer radio equipment, the newly created class of console radio gramophones, which combined in one beautiful case with decorative finishing a high-quality radio receiver, an electric player with automatic record change, and an acoustic speaker with high sound quality. RCA Victor also broke into the recording market, having lost the technology of gramophone production. Gramophone Company in 1931, as a result of a merger with Columbia Gramophone Company, changed its name to EMI, Electric and Musical Industries, and for many decades to come became the leading recording company in the world. And Marconiphone and His Master's Voice Company in the 30s became leaders in the production of household appliances in the UK, and as the most popular brands belonging to the EMI company continued to produce very high-quality radios, radio gramophones, and even televisions, identical in design and construction. Until in the mid-50s, EMI completely abandoned the production of radio equipment and focused exclusively on the music industry. Thus ended the glorious history of Marconi's household radio. EMI itself as an independent recording company existed until 2012, then was divided into two parts. One of them became the property of Sony Music, and the other, the property of Universal Music Group. Although the retail network of audio discs and records seems to still exist today, in a very limited number of stores, and with nostalgia for the past century of history. But let's return to the history of radio. In the context of the review of early serial superheterodynes discussed in previous series, let's focus on the popular model Marconiphone 262 AC of 1933. This stylish and beautiful radio is a 5-tube super without a high-frequency amplifier, which was more than enough for the small island territory of England. There are only two ranges here, long and medium waves. The first stage of a sufficiently powerful 2-tube sound amplifier is also an anode detector, not the best solution, which was later abandoned by all radio manufacturers due to rather large distortions. But the beginning of the 30s, as we remember, was a time of experiments and the search for concepts. So such a variety of designs in our time of standardization now surprises us very much. What is also very interesting in English radio engineering is the orientation almost exclusively to its own scientific developments, concepts, and element base. English radio manufacturers used only English-made radio tubes and other components, even though the radio tubes made by GEC, Marconi Osram, Mallard, Ediswan Mazda, Kossa or Brimar were more expensive than their European counterparts, because they were of very high quality. And of course, each manufacturer recommended using only its own radio tubes in its radio receivers. It should be said here that Great Britain even developed its own design of radio tubes for superheterodynes with the so-called English 7-pin base as an alternative to the German superheterodyne series of Type A, Type C and Type 11, the Dutch, Red series, of Type E, and the American octal radio tubes of the 1935 and 1937 models. But the most surprising and fascinating is the design of English radio tubes of the Catkin type with the attention, external anode. How English engineers and technologists managed to ensure the tightness of the structure at a high degree of vacuum is a big mystery to me. Unfortunately, this technology turned out to be very expensive and did not withstand competition in the class of household radios, although it was often used in military equipment. There is also one very interesting feature of the radio design of the late 20s and early 30s. The so-called block of integral capacitors was used, the horror of service centers of those times, and the double horror of modern restorers who have to repair these blocks. Imagine, you have to disassemble almost the entire chassis almost to the screws. Such solutions are found in radio receivers of many European and American radio manufacturers. But probably only in Marconi these integral blocks contain more than 24 filtering, decoupling and pass-through paper capacitors. For a comparison, in the Kunz, Lorentz and Siemens radios considered in previous reviews, there were only 3 to 5 of them and such a block. I think I mentioned all the main things. And finally, if you thought that the Gramophone Company was the only gramophone company that manufactured and sold radios through its subsidiary Marconiphone, then you are mistaken. Very similar stories were told by the American companies Brunswick, Sonora and Emerson, which were also gramophone companies at first. Just as the alternative story of the RCA Radio Corporation, which began its activities with the manufacture of radios, and then bought the Gramophone Company and also manufactured console electro-gramophones, was not unique. But you will be able to learn about these interesting stories in the following series. And in the nearest future, several series about early American superheterodynes. If you liked the video, please like, comment, subscribe. See you next week.
I never did much from the sky. Never went back at fireflies. But now that the stars are in your eyes, I'm beginning to see their light. Never went in the fire glory. I can't lie, I'm mistletoe.